What's going on, guys? Ah, so we had planned on going back out and picking up where we left off with Plan Z last week, and it's been raining on and off all day. So we were going to try to shoot something this afternoon. It ain't going to happen. So I figured, you know what? I'm in a Slant Six mood, and I've got all Slant Six stuff going on around me. So let's do a Slant Six like live. So I got Plan Z, and I got Winky over there, and let's talk Slant Six, right? I love Slant Sixes. I know a lot of you guys do too. You can't not love a Slant Six. Well, I mean, you can. I know of one very popular YouTuber that's like despises Slant Sixes, but I don't get that, man. They're such a happy thing. Ah, I got all of our regulars rolling in here. Gideon, Terrence, Dave Larson, what's happening? George Bonnie, the Pirate Apache. Yes, Plan Z. There she is. Everything's all back together again. Brakes do the right thing. So and the leak looks like it's gone. So I think we fixed that. Aaron Hinkley, you got a 170 in your 69 value two-door post. The 170 is a little taxed when you get to like because the 67, the second generation A bodies are around 400 pounds heavier on average than the first generation A bodies. So the 170 worked really well in like the 63, 64, 65 cars. I have one right on. In fact, it's literally one sitting exactly behind you, with over 1,000,000 miles on it. The 170 works really good in those lighter cars, but it gets taxed once you get to the 67 and up cars. So, but they still motor down the road just fine. Uh, Curtis Randolph, I make you really miss your Slant Six. For a while, I had no Slant Sixes in my life, and then I picked up the 64, and it was like all of a sudden I was like, oh, I forgot how much I love these things. But back in the day, I never did anything with them because, like, I was a hot rodder, right? Who messes with Slant Sixes? Yeah, no, me. I mess with Slant Sixes. Chris Greenaway, what's the biggest car that Slant Six powered weight wise? Um, they were in C bodies, and back way back when. I used to do a lot of work with car services back in New York City, and I remember somebody brought me a '72 Plymouth Fury. One of the car services had bought a '72 Plymouth Fury that was a factory Slant Six, and I put a 360 in it for them because the Slant Six just wouldn't go up hills. Loaded passengers in a 4,500 pound car, it just wasn't going to happen. So they were in C bodies up until the very early '70s. Uh, let's see. Ruckwarts, we used to call the Slant Six sewing machines. They just take away. It's one of the things I love about them. I have a couple of dead stock slants. Like I have one in that '74 Duster. I have one in this. I have a '66 Dart here also. That's got a dead stock slant, and I get such mechanical like joy out of uh, what's that ASMR, right? The videos that they make, so like you get the sensory thing and you fall asleep and all that stuff. ASMR, right? I'm calling it the right thing. That's what I get out of these Slant Sixes. I'll fire one up and I'll sit down next to it and I'll just watch it run. I watch the fan blade go like this and listen to the lifters go tick, 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 tick. And it's like it's like uh Ugly White Guy, when will you do Junkyard Gold with Steve? It won't be called Junkyard Gold. It's going to be Junkyard Crawl. And I spent a good hour on the phone with Steve last night. And we have many things that we're going to talk about very soon, but not yet. So, but you're going to be seeing a lot of Steve on this channel, and conversely, you're going to be seeing a lot of us on his channel. Uh, Andrew Justice, he had a '69 Swinger Slant Six, took it out for a 340. That's like what all of us did back in the day. It was like, I was like everybody else. I have big block, right? Gotta have a big block and everything. So yeah, Slant Six was just something you sucked out and you threw away. But that was back in the '70s. Time changes everything. Time changes the perspective on things. So now what was junk 40 years ago is like, get that thing away from me, is just a beautiful piece of American. It's history. It's history. It's living history. Ray Brensyke, Slant Six is relaxation therapy. Had a Chevy Six, but on a trip I got tired of the sound. Yeah, they drone. You know, all inline sixes kind of drone. Uncle Tony's goes, well, Kathy, I like to, this is Uncle Kathy. I like to put a Slant Six in the charger. What do you think? I don't think it'll make it. You know that little hump at the end of the driveway. You know where it goes like the curb cut at the end. I don't think it would make it up off that because the charger's like 4,200 pounds. I don't think it would make it up the curb cut onto the driveway with a Slant Six. Uh, you want a Chuck Attal? You want an old truck with a slant? Sell somebody sell him an old truck with a slant. Ugly white guy, thanks for doing junkyard crawl. I love that you go from one thing to the next. Yeah, well, I I bounce around like I have so many varied interests. You know what I mean? And they all kind of fall into the same universe of things. You know, cars and certain types of technology. So yeah, but it all fits together. You know, in some weird bizarre way, it all kind of fits together, and that's what this channel is. Good evening, 426 Rich. How are you? Don Steele, didn't the Slant come in some full size Dodge trucks? Yes, yeah, it was the base engine in the D100s, D150s, up until 1986 or 1987. That was the last year for them. Ruckwarts, why couldn't the average mechanic set the choke and high idle on the slants? I have no idea. I mean, it's as simple as you could possibly get. Uh, Ari, what's happening, brother, man? Slide six, say no more. All right. By the way, Dallas, if you're watching this, thank you, bro. Thank you so much. I got it now. You hear that? I got the sore throat happening. Thank you, Dallas. I did a live with Dallas last night. He comes in, he's coughing. He looks like death warmed over, right? Dallas, you're gonna give him. Oh, I'll be all right. You'll be all right. You'll be fine. Yeah, no. Need metal. Get the G Tech on that thing. The G Tech shit the bed. We used it. The G Tech. We used it a couple of times. Um, we used it on the '67 Dart GT. We used it on my friend Josh's Charger, and then we tried to use it a couple of months ago um, on something. I forgot what it was, and it just won't work. It goes blank. Like you hit the accelerate, and it goes as soon as it's supposed to start the timer, it just goes blank screen. So the G Tech is gone. I don't want to bother with it. It was a neat toy to play with for a few minutes. COVID-19 or 20? It's COVID 225. Chris Greenaway, slants are the most unappreciated motor. Now it's an affordable at the same time as no one wants. 340 is becoming out of reach shortly. Yeah. Hey Dakota. Oh, thanks for timing out Dakota, Ari. You're right on the money. I feel like okay. Yeah, there we go. I can lean forward now. All right. Mac Herbert. I'm planning on building a Turo 225 and a 69 4-door Valiant later this year. Thanks for all the slant-related tech tips and knowledge. You keep it coming. Yeah, slants respond to turbocharging like there's no tomorrow. There's guys out there making like stupid power with turbocharged slants, like well over 600 horsepower. The main reason I went with normally aspirated with Plan Z over here is because I want to find out what the motor is capable of on its own, like without any sort of power adder. What can you get out of a completely naturally aspirated slant? How far can you go with the thing? So yeah, a turbocharger or nitrous slants because of the long stroke, the small bore, and the long stroke. A slant is a natural for nitrous. I don't think any engine has ever been more architecturally suited to nitrous oxide than a Slant Six. And there's one guy. He goes by the name. I think it's Charlie S. I believe his name is. And I know that he's got a 170 in a Barracuda, like a 65 Barracuda, and on a small shot, he's gone like 11 and change. with an otherwise stock 170 Slant Six. I read about it pretty extensively, maybe 2 years ago when I started getting into the Slant Six thing. So I read about it then, and I remember the details then. I remember seeing pictures of this. He made a fogger system for it, and a nozzle screwed into the stock intake manifold. So it was a very, very impressive thing. You Google Charlie S or search Charlie S nitrous slant and see what comes up. Like I said, when I looked into it a couple of years ago, I read all about it. I learned as much as I could about what he was doing. So it slips my mind a little bit now. But yeah, the impression that I got after working with nitromethane motors and knowing their architecture, how they work best with the small bore long stroke. Um, Same thing with the Slant Six and nitrous oxide and nitromethane have that in common. You know what I mean? They want that load and they want that, you know, that architecture. They want the resistance. It's all about making torque. So, but again, and turbocharger also. It's a natural for turbocharging. But like I said, I want to see what I can get out of a stock Slant Six. On its own. What will it do on its own? I got a super chat here. Who do we got? Well, pardon. Thank you, man. You had a guy come up to me while I was putting gas in my 64 Dart. He told me he was a mechanic at a factory that utilized industrial Slant Six engines for the plant's backup generators. Yeah, they're still out there, man. Like 40 years after they're still out there powering things, generators and pumps and all sorts of other things. They're that bulletproof. I mean, they'll run literally for years on end, right? Just keep throwing fuel at it, and it'll run literally forever. Okay, what do we got here? UTG squad. Love that you were going to work with Steve Maggs. Me too. We have Steve and I have a lot in common. Joe Brennan, is the 170 Slant Six the most efficient Cold War era motor ever made? I must know. No, no. I wouldn't. This slant is not the most efficient. No, actually the biggest problem with the slant was, and I did that video called "Understanding the Slant Six," right? And the biggest problem with the slant is the era that it was designed in, right? Was an era. It was pre-interstate, and uh, it was during an era of manual transmissions, non-synchronized manual transmissions, and the engines were built to be lugged, right? They were built to be lugged. They were built to be put in second gear, use first gear just to get the car going, and they were built to be put in second gear and driven up hills and down. So it's more of a low to mid range torque motor. So no, it's not the most efficient by a long shot, but it's one of the more friendly designs. And it's ubiquitous. You know what I mean? It's the Slant Six. It's legendary. There's a band called Slant Six Mind, right? The Slant Six is just ingrained in automotive culture. The survivalists will tell you that after a nuclear apocalypse, the only things left operating on the planet are going to be roaches and Slant Sixes. So whether or not the engines actually deserve that kind of praise, I don't know, but I enjoy being part of it. Dalton Sweezy, thank you. What do I need to do so I can learn your ways and work for me? You don't want to work for me. You want to learn my ways, man. My ways are. I have a problem. It's like I'm a damaged individual. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, you want to learn my ways, you got to have that same kind of damage and hyper focus and dive in. It's my life. So you want to learn my ways, make cars your life, and then my ways will automatically happen in your life. I'm not special. I'm just crazy. Uh, Slant Six is the Ric Flair of the motor world. Okay, I'll give you that. Dave Marshall, you had a Galaxy, I imagine you mean. Back in the day that smoked a Slant Six Dart. That car was so fast the state trooper would borrow it to go on interstate chases. Did he actually come and knock on your door and say, "Hey, I got an interstate chase going on. I need your car real quick"? Is that how it worked? I, hey, I'm the state police. I have an interstate chase right now, and I heard that your car beat a Slant Six. Quick, I need to borrow it so I can get out there and chase him. That's how it went. Yeah. Eureka 7-way, were Slant Sixes ever fitted with Chrysler AC? Yeah. It was dealer available AC in the early A bodies, 1960. Wait, it was dealer available AC in 63, 64, 65, factory available in 66 up. Uh, Timothy Keith, the 7981 R body has a Slant Six as an option, but I've never seen one. Yeah, yeah, no. When those R bodies were around, like in New York City, I remember when those were around, and actually most of them had Slant Sixes. Those are great looking cars, like they're extinct, they disappeared, but they were actually really, they were like majestic looking cars, weren't they? Like they were proud. Robert Alexander, Slant Six is a great sawmill engine. Yep. Anthony Smythe, I had read from a Slant Six developer that if you could run 5 or 6 foot long tubes, it would put out a lot of power. I never heard anything like that. Um, Mark Allen, thank you, sir. Well, I guess my, because I have 3 XJs now, and they all have 4-liter AMC motors in them, but they're really built by Chrysler, so I guess, you know, yeah, it's still more power, or no car, right? Eureka 7-wave, most efficient Mopar engine from the classic era, if not the Slant Six. The efficiency, just like inch for inch, pound for pound, work produced, longevity, and the whole 10 yards, the 318. The best overall engine, um, the most flexible overall engine, the one engine that you could ask to do anything and it would return, would be the 383. Throttle watch. All the Slant Sixes I ever saw had a rod through the block, and it's always either number 5 or number 6. You notice that? Always number 5 or number 6 is what it throws. Um, your name can be here for $20. If you were picking a second place for favorite '60s engineers, what company would I choose? Um, Probably Buick. Um, I don't want to say General Motors as a I don't want to say General Motors as a blanket statement, but I would say probably Buick division, followed by Chevrolet. Tom Hughes, how much crank clearance do you lose from the 170 to 225? It's a 1 inch difference in stroke. So one of the big problems you have with the 225, okay, and so yeah, and this is a problem, okay. One of the problems you have with the 225 is that the way the oil pan is designed on these engines, because of the way they fit in the cars, because you got a K-frame and you have steering that have to be cleared, okay. One of the big problems you have with the Slant Six is that at the 225 size, the crank throws and the counterweights come within a 1/4 inch of the floor of the oil pan at the front and at the back. So cylinders 1, 2, and 3, the rods at the bottom of the stroke, and then the counterweights following them are only a 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the oil pan. And then you have the same situation at number 6 in the back, right? 5 is just at the end of the lip, and then 6 is like that. So you got 4 cylinders that are windage nightmares. They're always spinning in that cloud. So that's on the 225. The 170 has the same architecture as far as oil pan goes, has the same distance, but you get an extra 1/2 inch. So there's 3/4 of an inch clearance between the connecting rods and the counterweights on the 170. So the 170 picks up horsepower, has a horsepower advantage. Forgetting about cubic inches, has a horsepower advantage over the 225 just in that lack of windage. And I'm going to say it's an honest 10%. One of the things I did with this, people on Plan Z, um, on Plan Z, one of the things people notice about it right away is how snappy it is, right? Because it is. It's like you hit it and it's like rock. It doesn't sound like a typical Slant Six, and the reason for that is because I used the lightest crankshaft they made. It's the 1987, 1981 through, is it 81? 1980 through 87 cast crank, and it has the counterweights are almost completely gone. It's 20 pounds lighter than the earlier motor, and because there's so little counterweight, that it cuts that windage problem at the front and the back of the oil pan next to nothing. And so that's why this engine responds the way it does. It's because it's got that lighter crankshaft in it with the connecting rods or the counterweights that aren't spinning all of that oil up. Christopher Kennard, $5. Thank you, sir. Is there something in the balance harmonics of the cylinders in a row that helps longevity? Slant 6 AMC, I6 Ford are all known for longevity. Yeah, well, the inline six engines cancel their own vibrations. They snore, they purr, but they don't vibrate. Um, and it just has to do with the sequences because you're running the two outboard cylinders and you're running the two inboard cylinders and you're running the two in between cylinders, and they're all rising and falling in unison like that. It has perfect primary balance, running balance. Uh, Simon TJ, the 4-liter straight six on my Jeep XJ has over 400,000 kilometers and has never let me down. Just saying. Yeah, no, they're great motors. Uh, Eric Johnson, used the late model camshaft with the windage tray from a 340 to keep the oil from coming up and disturbing the crank. What I did with this one is I took a V8. I did a video on it. You can go back. It was last year, but I took a V8 windage tray and I sectioned it out and I built it into the stock oil pan. So it doesn't have a separate windage tray that bolts to the motor. The windage tray is actually welded into the oil pan. There's a lot of baffling that I added too. So that it's got a partial crank scraper built into it. And again, that adds to the reason why it's so snappy. It's got a partial crank scraper built into it also. But you don't want to actually ever use a crank like a true crank scraper on a Slant Six. That's because the camshaft is only lubricated by splash. There is no oil galley above that feeds oil down to the camshaft. 100% of the oil that the camshaft gets on a Slant Six is thrown off the rods. So you need to maintain some windage in a slant. Um, Mike and Will Connolly, 466 people watching, largest I've ever seen for you. No, we've had more, but we typically do generic lives, and they don't bring in as many viewers. Um, your name can be here. What do the slants in your fleet see for fuel economy? So. The 170 in Mrs. Landy here. It's a 170 automatic with a 294 gear. Originally had 323s, and I swapped it over to 294. Low 20s on a good day, right? Average highway and around town. Low 20s, 20, 21 miles to the gallon, 22 miles to the gallon, about tops. That's like when the air is perfect and the motor is just running right, like in the fall. That's the only one I could think of that I actually spent enough time with that I could say, yeah, this is the mileage that it got. Uh, Fubar fighter. In my experience, there was nothing stock under 400 cubic inches that could handle a 3-4 barrel in 1960 streets. I know. But you remember something? If you go back to the 1960 street scene, right? Tires. There were no tires. There was no traction. Tires were terrible. So you could have a high, you could have a 421 Pontiac, a high compression 421 Pontiac, or you run out there with a max wedge, or you know, a seriously high horsepower engine, 450 horsepower, 475 horsepower, but you couldn't hook it up. Where the 383 had that perfect balance, it made power, but it made it at a higher RPM, and it was a gentle power, so you could leave. And while a higher horsepower car be spinning the tires, you're actually covering ground and getting it out. You know what I mean? So yeah, the 383s were very potent on the street. Anthony Smiley, I like these live broadcasts best. Car behind you and delving into Mopar. Yeah, I have fun with them too. Rusty's Turbo Garage. What is the lowest octane pump gas you run on the Slant? 87. I just, all of my slants, with the exception of this thing over here, because it's 11-to-1 compression, all of my slants run on 87 octane unleaded, 10% ethanol gas, just regular pump gas. Power nap. I bought a 4-speed Duster because of you. I'm having a blast restoring it. Excellent. American. Oh, it's Dallas. Yeah, hey Dallas. You gave me a cold, man. You hear that? That's from you, Dallas. Yeah, the 389 Pontiac was exactly like the 383 Mopar. Just a happy go-go motor. Oh, okay. Thanks, Kat. K. Reich, have you ever looked into the mods done to the 2225 crowd since they were based on the Slant, same born stroke? They weren't based. The 2 point, that's a myth. The 2.2 is not based on the Slant Six. It's the 2.2 is its own design, and it's a good design. And the reason I know Richard Holder is working with 2.2, and I'm excited to see what he gets out of it. But the reason I don't mess around with 2.2s, even I've had those engines in the past when they were around, but the reason I don't mess with them is because they're not like, I can't just run over to pull apart and grab one, right? Then there isn't enough of an enthusiast support network for those engines. So when you need a part, you know what I mean? You need a simple thing, you need a timing belt tensioner, or whatever it happens to be. They don't carry them in the auto parts stores. You can't run over to pull apart. There isn't a local 2.2 guy that you can go see to go grab some. Whereas it's much easier to build, let's say, a 383 Mopar or a 340 or a Slant Six. It's much, much easier to do those engines than it is to do your 2225s. So that's why I stay away from them. Oh, the 22 had the same bore spacing. Well, both of those engines were designed for space limitations. That's where they have it in common, because the Slant Six was designed with the 1960 Valiant in mind. The engine was designed specifically around that body, and it was designed specifically at the 170 size to fit in that body, the 1960 Valiant. Okay. The 22 was designed as a transverse mount. So both of those engines have that one thing in common from the very beginning. They were both designed from the get-go to be the shortest possible package. That's why, like, for instance, on the Slant Six, it's slanted to the side, which lowers the hood line, but it also allowed the engineers to move the water pump back. So a Slant Six is only about 2 inches longer front to back than a small block. Vic Martin, where's the nitro stuff? Not here now. Um, let's see. Bruce Fisher, how do we send you a picture of a car? I know you'd be intrigued. 73 Monaco wagon with a shortened half-ton Dodge 4x4 looks right. I can picture it already, man. I can picture it already. James Knudsen, no support. I guess that means no 3338 V6 project. No, it's just I see. I love stuff like that. So if I was to come across somebody, you know what I mean, like in my travels, and they did something crazy with a 3.3, right, or 3.8, or a 3.0 Mitsubishi motor, which was an excellent engine, right? Um, I would geek out over it. I would do videos on it for sure. I would geek out. I would love it, but I wouldn't get involved with it for myself only because it's so limited. And there's so many different things I want to do that I want to get bogged down and married to one particular engine. Does that make any sense? So yeah, I love, just because you don't see me doing stuff, like I have a thing for LSs. I have an absolute soft spot in my heart for Windsor Fords. I mean, trust me when I tell you, I love these things, but you won't see me getting involved with them because it's too much of a sidetrack from what I've got going on already. Ari, Tony, at the storage where my things are, they have a 70 slinger rotting away. Well, go get it. I know you've already asked. You've already asked. Um, let's see. Timothy Keith, the Slant Six. Wait, I gotta get back up there. The Slant Six doesn't tolerate much compression ratio increase on 87 octane. If water methanol injection could help the motor, it would feel stronger at 9-1. The stock compression ratio is only 7-1. Pretty pathetic. Okay, so here's the thing with these engines, right? They have an extremely small bore. It's a 3.4-inch bore, and it has a very long stroke and a very long rod. So the motor is lazy off the get-go, right? The first couple of degrees of crankshaft rotation past top dead center, there's a lot of resistance. The fuel charge is burned rapidly in a point where it's being least productive. Okay, so Slant Sixes are very sensitive to ignition timing, where most engines will make optimum power in, let's say, the 32 to 36 degree range. You know, typical V8. Slant Six does the same thing at 28 degrees. So it's not that the engine won't tolerate compression ratio. It's that it won't tolerate compression ratio and timing because of that small bore. Remember, once the fire is lit, the spark plug lights the fire doesn't have very far to go before it clears to the other side of the chamber, as opposed to, let's say, a picture of 400 Chrysler, where same spark plug, same kernel of flame, but look how far it has to travel across the piston. It takes a lot of ignition lead to make that happen. On a Slant Six, it's got to go just a little squirt right across, right? So it's not that they don't tolerate compression ratio. They don't tolerate the combination of compression ratio and too much timing. This thing, I've got this set right now at 26 degrees. And where you would say, well, it's locked out at 26 degrees. And you say, how does it even work, right? That's not possible. No, I go to 28 degrees and you feel it actually, like it's laboring at 28 degrees. It's like fighting itself. At 26 degrees, it rolls and it's happy. So that's our starting point. I haven't even begun to jet carburetor or work on any of that stuff yet. So I'm just going by seat of the pants, snappiness, how it's feeling, how it sounds. And 26 degrees is its happy zone. Uh, Brent Nixon, good evening, UTG. Thanks for all the great content. Thank you for recognizing that, recognizing us, Brent. Uh, let's see. Joseph Atkins, how did you like the movie Duel? I love that car. Um, Rusty Turbo's Garage. I think my question was a little too broad with the Plan Z Dart. What is the lowest octane you can run? I have a Turbo 4306 and detonation is a huge problem. Well, if I'm not mistaken, those turbo those 300s run hot to begin with. I remember those things with detonation monsters. Like when I was a regular mechanic back in the day, those engines always had detonation issues. They always ran hot. So I don't know if it's something particular to that engine. On Plan Z, I have no idea. We haven't actually run the car yet, so I'm just throwing like 93 pump in there, and whatever it's going to run, it's going to run. But I'll be tuning the engine around 93 pump gas because that's what's available. That's what I want to tune around. Um, Let's see. Consumer of stuff. Straight six or V12. Why are Americans obsessed with eight bangers? Oh man, the American V8 is just the easy way to go. It's the simple, inexpensive, user-friendly way to make power. I know Europeans. I know you guys love the very exotic stuff, right? Hot rodding to you guys is more of a high-end thing. It's more of a, you know what I mean? It's, you guys generate McLarens. We do Corvettes, right? To Europeans, modifying and hot rodding is like a very noble, high-end cause. And us dirtbag Americans, we like, we just like to hang out on the side of our house and crank on shit. So that's why we love V8s the way we. That's why we're always stuck to the V8 thing, man, because it's just simple. It's simple. Um, let's see. Ari, there's a kind of sense of grandeur with a V8. To us, um, Ray Brand's like the variety is the spice of life. The slant is spice. Zero, you miss your slant six, and your call will go back one day, maybe after we get that 70 swinger. There's always time for slants, man. It's always slant time will come. D Scaglione, UTG, would you ever Hemi head a slant six? Okay, there's a okay. First, the bore spacing on the Dodge Red Ram Hemi is nearly identical to the Slant Six, but you'd have to break it up into the Slant Six has the bores broken up in the uneven spacing. Not all of the cylinders are the same spacing between each other because of the way the main bearings are laid in the motor. Um, because of the architecture of the motor. Like they squeezed the cylinders as close as they could together, but they still had to leave room for main bearings. And that's why the Saint only has four main bearings, because you could build a shorter motor with four mains than you can with seven mains, because the main saddle takes up space. The cylinders have to be further apart. That's why you Fords, Chevys, AMCs all have seven main bearings, and these things have four. Um, Getting back to the Hemi head thing, the bore spacing on the closed cylinders is the same as on a Dodge Red Ram Hemi. Um, there was a Photoshop job going around for this is about 2-3 years ago. Somebody who had put together what looks to be a functional hemispherical head slant six, a push rod Hemi head slant six. We know that it's a Photoshop. I know that it's a Photoshop because in order to operate the exhaust valves on that engine with a straight push rod, like it shows on that, the push rod couldn't. It would have to go right through the middle of the piston to get to where it would have to be to operate that rocker arm. So I know that was a Photoshop. You could find it. Just go to Google Images and Hemi Slant Six. The pictures look convincing as hell. Somebody did an amazing job on it, but it's not real. Excuse me. The only way you could do a cross-flow hemispherical head on a Slant Six is to do an overhead cam setup. Uh, thank you, D. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah. This is all from Dallas. This is because I did the tech video last night with Dallas. Showed last night with Dallas. There you go. We got it. Thank you, man. Uh, Olive, I actually did prefer my 318 when my slant blew, but I would have been happy just to upgrade my slant. The 318 is a better driving combination. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. You know, what I mean, I'm not going to. I'm not here to like. I'm not here to puff the Slant Six to be something that it wasn't. It was an economy motor. It was it was a bottom of the barrel. Like it was the base engine. You know what I'm saying? Everything was a step up. A 273 is a better motor, a better driving motor. The 318 is a much better driving motor. So, oh yeah, I mean, that's why people paid extra money and got the V8s because they ran better than the Slant Sixes. But using the Slant Six on its own merits, as its own device, pretending none of the other things existed, right? That's where my interest is. Chris Freemasser, AHR equals awful hacking respiratory ailments. Yeah, right? Uh, Dick Gazania, Uncle Tony's Garage, could you give us a little bit of detail on the pros and cons of the Slant Six only having four main bearings? Well, here's an interesting thing, right? Well, first off, the Slant Six uses the same main bearings as a 426 Hemi or 440. It uses RB size main bearings, right? Well, pardon me. Thank you for vitamin C. I guess it's too late for zinc, right? So the Slant Six uses the same main bearings, same rear seal as a 426 Hemi. Okay, there's only four of them, and like I said, the reason why they went with four is because they wanted to make the motor as narrow as short as possible, and they save probably close to an inch by knocking out those three intermediate main bearings. Now you would think that it would be detrimental that once you get to a certain horsepower level that there would be problems, but there's not. People make 600 horsepower turbocharged now. Full house turbocharged Slant Sixes are making well over 600 horsepower. They run well into the single digits in the quarter mile, and they all have four main bearings. They all have to stop. So you would think on paper that it would be a severe disadvantage, but to my knowledge, nobody has ever run into the situation where that four main bearing crank won't do the job. Um, the cubic inch part of the engine and the cylinder part of the engine won't make enough power, even under extreme conditions, to overpower the crankshaft. So there is no downside, or at least nobody's found a downside to it yet. The flip side, the positive side, is that there's that much less parasitic drag. Right? Forget about that the engine is going to be probably 15 pounds lighter overall because of the less webbing and so on and so forth. But you've also got the parasitic losses that go along with feeding the extra three main bearings, rotating the three main bearings. And the oiling system has three less main bearings that it has to contend with. So there is no downside to the four. It's not weak. It's people prove them incredibly strong all the time. Uh, Jiffy McSchlitz. What is your opinion of the 4.7 Magnum? It's junk. You won't find me talking shit about too many engines. I love engines, right? There's almost no engine I won't find something to love about, right? And the 4.7 is junk. I've worked with them. I rebuilt a couple of them. They're overcomplicated. They're junk. They're junk. Vic McMartin, Jim Bennett took out a life insurance policy on Tony. Nah, he wouldn't do something like that. He doesn't care about the views he gets when I pop on his show. I love Jim. I just called Jim actually, uh, right before we came on. Uh, South Jersey Jim, the Slant Six can be a remarkably efficient motor. What makes it so miserly? Is it simple? Well, it's miserly in the right car. If you put it in the wrong car, it's a pig. Like for instance, you put the Slant Six in like a B body size car, right? A typical B body weight car. Rolling down the road at let's say 3,600 pounds, 3,500, 3,600 pounds, which is typical. Typical car with a spare tire and just right. Okay, 35, 3,600 pounds, it's not a miserly engine. It'll drink gas because it has to work. And when an engine works, it's got to be fed. So your foot is always further down on the gas to accomplish the same thing as you would with let's say, a 318. But when you put the Slant Six in the type of car that it was designed for, a sub 3,000 pound, 26, 2,700 pound car without a lot of frontal area, um, where it was designed to be, it is miserly. Because that's and the right speeds that it was designed to be run at. The Slant Six was designed to be run in the 3,000 RPM range, right? Because that was highway speed, 3,000 RPM. That was about right. Today it's screaming, right? Because all our modern cars, they idle along at 60, 70 miles an hour. You're doing 1,400 RPM with all of the overdrives and lockups and everything. But the Slant was actually it's designed to operate at 3,000, 4,000 RPM. So as long as you've got those engines in there, as long as the Slant is in a package that it was originally intended to be in, and operated in the range that it was originally intended to be operated in, yeah, they're extremely efficient. Matt S. always thought about a 3.9 Magnum with a carb intake and put in a Valiant. I have toyed with that idea also. My experience, my only experience with the oh, Greg Collins, I want to talk about that in a second. I want to talk about that in a second. The feather duster, because I had one. Um, what was that question there? The 3.9, the 3.9. My only experience with the 3.9, right, was miserable. I've had a couple of them, right? Uh, I had a red Dakota. I had I forget which year it was. One of the years that had the 3.9, and it was it got 12 miles to the gallon. It had no power, no matter what you did with this thing. Everything functioning the way it's supposed to, freshly tuned, no misses, no weirdnesses, not using it in any sort of, the thing would only get like 12 miles to the gallon. It wasn't a happy motor. It's not a happy combination. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And it wasn't just that one truck, because my friend Ralph the Cop, Ralph Mersick over here, he had an extended cab Dakota with a 3.9. His was four-wheel drive. And I borrowed that a couple of times, and I needed a truck like his to run around with. And it was the same situation. That thing only got about 10 miles to the gallon. And it was very so my only 3.9 experiences have been that they seem to be very laborious engines. They evidently they have to work harder than is necessary to produce the results that you would expect with just like regular driving. So I haven't found any 3.9 uh, examples that inspire me to say yes, something can be done with this engine. I think it's an unhappy combination. Um, the feather duster. One of you guys brought up a feather duster. I had one of those back in 1981 or 1982. It was I worked for a dealer. The guy's name was Patty Denuzzo, and I was a mechanic, and I did all his cars, and he would just leave stuff with me, and I had this '76 Feather Duster. I had it for a couple of months, and he just didn't care. You know what I mean? Just fix my cars, right? So I had this thing for a couple of months, and it was phenomenal. They claimed 36 miles to the gallon on the highway. Now, it didn't get 36 miles to the gallon on the highway. It got close to 30, right? The feather duster and the Dart Light. They did the Dodge version of it called the Light. And what this was it was a 225 Slant Six. It had an 833 overdrive 4 speed with a Hurst shifter, the same Hurst shifter you'd get on like a 340 car, right? Um, it had a 7 1/4 with 270 gears, and it had a distributor with a very quick curve built into it, and a carburetor that was jetted extremely lean, right? and it was a good combination. Like where the lean carburation would really give you a problem, that super low first gear in the 833 overdrive kind of made up for it. Um, they ran really good. They got good gas mileage. In addition to that, they had uh, aluminum underhood bracing. They had aluminum trunk bracing. They had aluminum bumper brackets and aluminum door hinges. So the total package weighed around 3,200 pounds, which is about 250 pounds lighter than a standard Slant Six Duster. But they were great. They were great. The unfortunate thing with those feather dusters is that everybody, they go, okay, it's got aluminum this, aluminum that. I'm going to turn it into a race car. So to find a feather duster or a dart light today that hasn't been like turned into a race car or just destroyed, they're really hard to come by. But they were great cars. It was a great driving car. I got, I'm getting messages here. Okay. Um, Wheelie King. I have a very low mileage Slant Six 904. I have a 60s Dart. My buddy Dave Mann was going to scrap, so I took it as payment for some machine work I did for him. $200 takes it, free to Tony. Thank you. I appreciate that. Are you close? I mean, I'll pay you for it. You know, you don't have to give it to me free. I'll pay if you're close. Yeah, I might be interested in that. Doug Narden, Torque Storm superchargers are grand. Yes, I built the very first Torque Storm Slant Six. I had a customer. He had a '64 Valiant. Um, it was a 225 automatic 7 1/4 car. '64 Valiant was a daily driver, and he wanted to build a supercharged Slant Six, and he wanted a 4 speed. So we converted to an 8 3/4. Oh no, eight and a quarter we used in that one. An 8 1/4 of a 4 speed, 833 4 speed, and I built a supercharged Slant Six. So uh, with that thing, let's see, the bottom end of that motor was a steel crank. It was a oh God, what year did I use for that? It was like a 66, 67. It was the same big heavy steel crank that they used up until 1974, 73. I ported the head. It was the regular stock head. We ported the head. I didn't mill it, didn't deck it because we didn't need compression. I used. Give me a second now. I'm trying to remember what pistons they were. Uh, it's going to come to me in a second. They weren't Weisco. They were, or maybe they were Weisco. It was a specially designed forged Slant Six piston that's available. One of you guys, I'm sure, is familiar with it. The downside of it is that you had to use a 198 length rod, which I'm very against. I feel that the stock length rod is too much to begin with, but with those pistons, you've got to use the 198 rod, which just too long, right? Uh, but besides the point, and we used a Clifford intake, a 600 of Holly, and the Torque Storm supercharger. And it was the very first Slant Six Torque Storm kit. And I was impressed with it. He got a really good deal on it. He got a discount on it because we were more or less doing R&D. So as we fitted, because they built it, they put the kit together, but they did it on an engine stand. They had never actually had the Torque Storm in a car. So as we were putting it together, we were sending them pictures of, okay, this goes here. You got to move this. You have to relocate the battery tray. By the time you're done on an early A body, on a 60 63 456 A body, you can't use a front mounted fan. You've got to use an electric fan, and the fan's got to be mounted in front of the radiator because there's no room on a 67 up cars. The motor is 2 inches further back, so you can get all that stuff in. But anyway, we built this engine. It ran great. I mean, it was strong, and for what it was, right? It was strong. Never had to do a drag strip or anything like that. But that was right before we got in. We started doing YouTube. It was about maybe 6 months, a year before we started doing YouTube. Uh, Tom Ashton, 300 horsepower normally aspirated should be no big deal either. Shave the head for compression with upgraded valve train. Use a 4-barrel intake, a Holly 360. That's not nearly enough. Headers, etc. No, man, 300 horsepower normally aspirated out of a Slant Six is pushing it, right? This thing over here, I'm gonna say 240 to 260, 75 horsepower or thereabouts, and that's about maxed. That's a seriously hardcore, normally aspirated slant. Mr. Will, thank you, man, for the contribution. That makes you awesome. Yeah, 300 horsepower. I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm not going to say 300 horsepower is impossible, but man, you're talking about overcoming a lot of major hurdles to make 300 normally aspirated horsepower with a Slant Six. You're talking about a 300 horsepower normally aspirated Slant Six is utterly undrivable. It's not going to be a street happy combination. I'll tell you that right now. This one here could actually probably be streeted. But again, I'm giving up a lot. It's only 11-1 compression. It's not race compression. It's not a full race cam. It's kind of middle of the road because I wanted my first learning experience with a hot rod Slant Six. I didn't want it to be radical to where I couldn't really learn the characteristics of the engine. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm about to start learning the high performance characteristics of a normally aspirated slant. So I didn't want to go crazy with compression. I didn't want to go crazy with valve size. I didn't want to go crazy with camshaft because I want to first learn how the motor works. What does the motor generally want, right? How does it want to be tuned with the intake manifold, with those runners and everything? How does it want to be jetted? Where does it want timing? I want to learn all of these characteristics about the engine before I go to the next step and actually start getting crazy with it. So this one here is mild enough that I would say it's on the edge of being streetable, but a 300 horsepower slant, normally aspirated, no, I mean that's a full race motor. That's a hairy, hardcore Slant Six. SRP, this Plan Z Dart is a slug. How would we know? I haven't run it yet. It may be a slug. I don't know. We're gonna find out on the 5th. James Knudsen, more revs than the 170. How close to the 225 does it get in terms of horsepower? The 170 is always going to have that disadvantage of being that much smaller. I mean, you're talking about a significant percentage of cubic inch loss. But the 170 is a far more efficient engine. The stroke is too long for the bore on a 225. The 170, everything is an exact proportion. The engineers who designed the engine, they originally designed it around the 170 size, and then they had to do the 225. When they went from the 170 to 225, this is all in pre-production. They started encountering all sorts of oiling issues, burning oil, all sorts of longevity issues that they didn't have with the 170. So the 225 from the very beginning was an engine that wasn't really very happy. They had to make changes to it to make it perform like the 170. They talk about the 170 running on the engine stand, the test stands, at 7,000 RPM for days at a time. This is back in 1959 when they were testing these things and they were working through it all. But the 225 never had that. The 225 it never attained the 225 never attained the love of the people who designed it. So if you go back and you read all the literature is there, you can find it, right? If you go back and you read the thoughts of the people, the engineers who designed these things, they all sing the praises of the 170, like universally. Nobody ever had a bad word to say about the 170. And one guy went as far, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Weirtman. I'm not sure. One of the guys that was involved in the project, quote, said the 170 is the perfect engine. Now, if you read through that whole thing, you'll never find anybody speaking praise of the 225. It was like the 225 was an afterthought, and it wasn't the happiest afterthought. Like it went against the principles that made the 170 the magic engine that it was. Pikus Barton, are you going to ever build a 170 using the tricks you picked up on hot rodding the 225? I'm learning the 225 now. That's what I'm doing with Plan Z. This is my education. And yes, uh, absolutely, there will be a 170. I wanted to do a 170 for the Miata. There's a 170 now. I wanted to build a really hot one, but after I got the engine in place, I realized there was no room for a header. The exhaust there would be no room for me in the car. You couldn't have a driver in the car if you put a header on the thing. Okay, so it's limited to the stock exhaust manifold. So I scrapped the idea of building a hot 170 for that. Instead, I still have the same ideas that I want to work with on the 170, but it'll end up here in Plan Z. That'll be the next engine that goes into Plan Z. It's going to be a full house 170. Fred Garvin, you sent an Uncle Kathy $10. Thank you. Vic McMartin, aluminum head for the Slant Six. Steve Mignanti said that he knows of 3 that were cast, and he actually had one of them. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know where they are, but there were 3 heads cast. I am surprised. I'm shocked that like Edelbrock, because Edelbrock makes an aluminum head for the 4-liter, right, for the Jeep motor. I'm shocked that Edelbrock never made an aluminum head for the Slant Six. I don't get it. There's so many people around the world that love these engines, that work with these engines, and like in places like Argentina, they actually have racing series that are based around the Slant Six. But nobody's ever made an aluminum aftermarket head. For the life of me, I don't understand why. Um, Richard Pelvin, how would a D-stroke 225 run? A D-stroke 225 is a 198, and it's terrible. The 198 is it's exactly what it is, a D-stroke 225. The problem there is the rod length, right? Like the bore and stroke relationship is actually closer in sync, but the rod is so freaking long, and it's just there's no motion. The first couple of degrees of crankshaft rotation. So as the piston rises to the top, spark plug lights the mixture. The piston's on its way down, and at that point, the connecting rod is only leaned over like this. While the cylinder is using up the lion's share of the charge, the rod is barely leaned over and it's barely moving on the crankshaft. By the time it actually comes into sync, right? Piston, pistons, the flame travel, piston speed, and crankshaft position. By the time everything comes into sync, the motor's at like 3,000 RPM. If you ever drive, and that same thing with the 225. If you ever drive one of these things like regularly, you'll notice that it'll make no power at all until around 2,000, 2,500 RPM. Then it'll start to go. Well, the difference driving the seat of the pants difference between a 198 and a 225 is about 1,000 RPM. So the 225 will start making power at around 2,500 RPM. The 198 there's no real motion, no real oomph until you're around 3,500 RPM. So yeah, no, D-stroke 225 is not the answer. The answer is a shorter deck, because remember the 170 has a 1-inch shorter deck than the 225. The perfect combination, that I can see on paper would be the 198 block or 198 crank in the 170 block with the shorter 170 connecting rods. That would be the combination to build, and that's actually what I plan on building for myself. Okay. Oh, Rusty Jung, thank you, sir. Recently got my 230 flathead with cast iron headers and a 2-barrel running on the ground, and it feels snappy. You should build one, Tony. Yeah, you're talking about the floating power motor, right? Yeah, if I had something to put one in, I would. Um, what Zonda just got here? What's happening? Uh, Jay Yeager, what about putting in pistons backwards in a slant? They're backwards in this one. Um, Visual, so nice. A 451 version of the Slant Six. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Uh, Richard Bucket, you're trying to buy a UTG stamp medium shirt out of stock. When will it be available? I don't know. Uncle Kathy is in charge of merch. Her and Uncle Crystal do merch. I have nothing to do with it, so I have no idea. I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even go to where we sell the damn things. They handle all that stuff. Um, Hemi Kuda, why do all straight sixes have one side of the engine as the intake and exhaust? It's so stupid. Well, okay. Remember that all of you, the only domestic six-cylinder engine that wasn't designed as an economy engine is the Pontiac overhead cam, the Sprint motor, right? And that was a Chevy, an inline six Chevy block with the overhead cam Pontiac head, and even that was reverse flow, meaning that the intake and the exhaust are both on the same side. The reason that all of our domestic inlines were built like that was simply because they were economy engines. Nobody was expecting anybody to try to make crazy horsepower out of them. Nobody was expecting anybody to race them. These were bread and butter engines. And from a packaging standpoint, it's just easier to put the intake and the exhaust on the same side, mostly because of carburetor warming. So picture this now. And now remember, you're talking about from the perspective of an engineer that has to build something that the average housewife is going to turn the key and drive and not have any problems with. Okay. The reason why our domestic low performance inline sixes are reverse flow is because you can't hang the carburetor. Remember, these things were all carbureted. It was all designed in the 50s and the 60s. You can't just hang the carburetor in the air, right? And get sufficient heat underneath it to atomize the fuel, keep the fuel in right. So the cars would never warm up, and they would ice up. The carburetors would ice up in cold weather. So by using a reverse flow head, by having the exhaust and the intake on the same side of the engine, you've got a natural heat stove for the carburetor. So it'll run, and that is why all of these engines. And the engineers weren't stupid; they know. Yeah, yeah. Put the one get the intake in on one side and the exhaust out on the other. The second reason for it is because the only way to accomplish that with an inline six is an overhead cam. And again, these were economy engines. The overhead cam was just the timing belt back then was an exotic thing. Long timing chains have their problems with whip and wear and guides and everything else. So for the purposes that these engines were being used for, and the reason why you'd have to have overhead cam to have a cross flow head is because you got to make room for the push rods, and there just isn't the room for the push rods. See what I'm saying? So the combination of the heat thing and the lack of desire for an overhead cam setup, that's why they're all reverse flow. Uh, Timothy Harper, I have a 1963 170. Which is better to build compression? Mill the head? You can't or mill the block. The 170 is a zero deck engine. A lot of people don't realize this. The 170 is a zero deck engine. It uses the same pistons as the 225, but the piston is zero deck. So the only way you could raise the compression on it is milling the head. Now, one of the things that I want to do when I build my 170 is use the zero deck pistons, but I'm going to weld closed the quench area on the cylinder heads to make a quench motor, to build a quench motor. And that's I've got in mind to try and duplicate the Magnum combustion chamber on the Slant Six head. So yeah, if you're going to try to raise the compression ratio on a 170, you can't touch the block; it's already there. You'd have to take down the head. Gypsy Shot. My Saab race car owes a bunch to the Slant Six when it comes to engine placement and design. I'm not familiar with the Saab, with high performance Saabs, but I'm gonna have to take your word for that. Uh, Al Nassner, an angle mill, but yeah, well, yeah, you couldn't angle mill it enough to get to close up the chamber. I looked at that. Z31. Good day, Tone. Hey, what's happening, man? Um, You Yanks have the 265s like us Aussies had? No, we never had those engines. We never had them. The closest thing we ever had to the 265 to your Hemi 6 is the AMC motors and like the 4-liter Jeeps, which I've got one back there that we're gonna start a rebuild series on very soon. Um, but uh, no, they didn't import any of them here. So we have no parts, we have no knowledge, we have no history. We have people are always asking me about those engines, but we never got them. We were Hemi 6 deprived. And for you American guys who are wondering, well, where's a Hemi 6, right? They put a Hemi head on it. No, they only called it was a marketing thing. They called it a Hemi 6, but it's an inline wedge. There's nothing hemispherical about it. Aaron Hinkley, GM Brazil did Crossflow 250 Chevy in the 90s. They were EFI, right? Exactly, they were EFI. All of the other inlines that we deal with were all designed in the 1960s, and they were designed around carburetors. Don Winnie English. Tony, did the aluminum block 225 make any? No, same exact horsepower. There was no difference. The aluminum 225 wasn't a high performance option. It was the motor was originally supposed to be done in aluminum, right? All of them were supposed to be aluminum, and AMC actually beat them to the punch in 1959, I think it was, with an all aluminum 6 that they had in production for a couple of years. Nobody ever mentions that one, right? But the aluminum slant, which they built about 50,000 of them for you people who aren't familiar. It's a cast iron head, an aluminum block. They built about 50,000 of them, but no, it was not a high performance option. It was just a weight saving economy, like, okay, high performance through weight saving. So you're saving 60 pounds. It's not that big of a deal in a regular car. Mike thank you, sir. Slightly different question. Have you ever done much with a GMC 351 Magnum V6? No. I just bought a 67 GMC with one freshly rebuilt for a reasonable price. They're huge engines. The big, giant, huge, heavy motors. I've never done anything with one of them, though. I've never worked on one, actually. Tim V, Slant 6 versus Jeep 4.0 straight. The 4 liters got it covered. The 4.0 is a better engine, just from the get go. The 4.0 was designed in a later period of time. It wasn't designed with the same size constraints or space constraints that the Slant 6 was. Guys, I'll tell you what. We're going to have to end this really soon because my battery is just about done here. Um, Let me see, what do I got? Hang on. Can you guys just chill for 1 minute? I'll be right back. I have to go get an extension cord to plug in. Okay. Sorry about that. Did I miss anything good? Oh, I missed a super chat. Who do we got here? Dragon Gamer, thank you. Have you ever used an electric carburetor injection from K&N on your Slant Six? I have not. I don't even know what you're talking about. Electric carburetor injection. As far as I know, K&N only makes like filters and stuff. Um, have you looked at Wayland Wire's Rat Rod Build GMC V12? Well, that's those two. That's those two V6s put together. James Hudson, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I answered two of your questions. You're not worthy, bro. You're more than worthy, and I'm grateful to have people to ask questions. So yeah, no, that's not necessary, man. I appreciate it. Uh, let's see. Timothy Keith, Edelbrock recently responded to a Slant Six fan. Yeah, that a Slant Six head is on the way on the to-do list, but many other priorities might not see the light of day. They can model the design and software. I have an insider. I actually have somebody who's as close to that particular project as could possibly be. Like I have a connection with the person who's actually this would be. It's not going to happen. They have so many other things going on. I seriously doubt that's going to happen. Timothy Harper, concerning my 63 170 slant six, how much? Oh, sorry, I got to scroll back up. How much would you mill the head for reliable use with 87 octane gas in a daily driver? Um, if you're running 87 octane gas in a daily driver, I don't really see I don't see the necessity of advancing the timing on the thing. To be honest, or advancing the timing of raising the compression on that. I honestly don't. Um, the motor it's an eight. I think it's 8.4, just shy of 8.5 to 1. Um, I if it's a daily driver, I would just clean the deck if necessary. Take a 10, 20 thousandths cut off of it. 100 thousandths cut would give you a full point, right? So you take 100 off the head, and you're going to go from 8.5 to 9.5 to 1. Um, but I don't think that's necessary. I honestly don't. And you can get it with the stock push rods up to a 200 thousandths cut. You can. Oh no, I'm sorry. Up to a 100 thousandths cut. You can get away with the stock push rods. You don't need more than 100, and you need a custom length push rod. Now to get this one to where it is, the the deck is cut 100 and the head is cut 110, and it uses a steel shim head gasket. And we worked it out on paper, and it's 11 and change to 1. Doug Nard, no, the GMC V12 is one block, two sets of heads, two intakes, two carbs. Yeah, okay, but it's based off that V6. Those heads and everything, all of those bits and pieces are from that V6. Uh, Harry Escat, how does adding a carb spacer add 4 horsepower? I saw it happen in X Garage. You could add a lot more than 4 horsepower. 4 horsepower is usually the low side of what adding a significantly sized spacer. There's no hard fast rule as to how much of a spacer will give you how much power, because every engine, every tuning situation, every intake manifold is different. So there's no formula to say this much space to give you this much power. But essentially, what it's doing is it does two things. First, it fools the engine into thinking you've got a bigger carburetor than you actually do. But the most important thing is that it homogenizes the mixture. It adds the bigger the plenum, the more homogeneous the mixture that is going to be pulled through each runner. So by adding spacer, you're smoothing, you're giving it plenum, and you're giving that. Does that make any sense? Um, hey Tony, can you do a video on the industrial version of the Slant Six? I've already done it. First off, there's very little differences. A lot of those slants were reverse rotation, so instead of using a timing chain, but they use a gear. But there really wouldn't be enough interest. Like it wouldn't get enough clicks. Remember, YouTube is a business. You do videos that get clicks, and industrial Slant Sixes aren't going to get clicks. Uh, Tony, you were full of bullshit. Yeah. Um, uh, Bentry, so Uncle Tony, I would like to ask you a very good but honest question. Would you do any project involving a K car and a Chrysler 2.2 four-cylinder engine project? Yeah, I talked about that before. I absolutely would, except that I don't. I'm maxed out. I don't have the time or the money or the inclination to go starting a whole new. The Cherokees are different. They're common. They're very easy to get parts for. If I need something, I can run right to the wrecking yard and get it. Anything to do with a 2.2 or 2.5 Chrysler, you have to deal with it. There's none available anywhere, and you have to deal with a very tiny pool of people who are interested in it. Like the 2.2, 2.5 Chrysler, the K car community is tiny, so there just isn't enough stuff available to them to make it a fun, easy thing to do. It's far easier to do a Slant Six or a Jeep 4 liter. Build a Quench 170 diesel. No, I thought about building a Quench 225 diesel. And if you guys are interested in diesel Slant Sixes, Chrysler in 1976, 1977 had a diesel program. They had running mules. They had a Dodge Aspen or Plymouth Volley or whatever it was running around the proving grounds with a diesel Slant Six. They had several of them actually. The motors were being put through the development phase, and they were doing good. Right, they were all right. Uh, but for some reason, they canned the project. Now you can find if you're interested in doing a Slant Six diesel, just do a quick Google search on Slant Six diesel, and you'll find a PDF that's all of the engineering papers directly from the Chrysler engineers on the diesel Slant Six. Everything, every specification, every bit of technical, everything that they did, the pump that they used, and the nozzle, just everything, right? It's all there. So if you're halfway interested in building a diesel Slant Six, 100% of the information that you need to do it directly from the Chrysler engineers that built them is available online. Really, King, what diesel slant? Yeah, man, Google it. Diesel slant. I'm telling you. Greg Collins, the diesels would develop a Perkins diesel. No, they were developed in house by Chrysler. Uh, Tony, any info on the 350 Chrysler V8 motor of the late 50s? It's just a tiny bore 383 is all it is, or 361. It's not worth getting involved in. Why do all the 4-barrel slant manifolds mount the carb the wrong way? Well, they mount them east to west. If you notice on mine over here, I made an adapter to mount my carburetor north to south. Uh, well, I mean east, which if you mount them east to west, which would be you would consider to be the wrong way. It's actually technically it would be the right way on an inline motor because the barrels, the outboard part, the outermost part of the barrels is closest to the outermost right runners. So that would make sense to mount it this way. But I don't like the idea of the carburetor having to work with the potential tuning issues of the carburetor being sideways like that. I know people run them sideways on tunnel rams all the time. I was like, for simplicity's sake, and I don't have to think about it, I'm going to mount the carburetor straight east and or north and south. So that's why on mine over here, I made an adapter to mount the carburetor what would be quote the right way. Ali would any plans to boost to 4.0? A possibility, a possibility. First, I want to do like I said, I have a 94 XJ in the back that's got a totally foobarred motor. So we're going to do a whole series of videos on that. Once that's all together, then I may think about building one for boost. Money contact, more content of your favorite V8, the 383B block. Coming, we're doing a whole 383 build on for the slag hammer. So and that'll probably be in the spring, next spring. Um, there'll be a lot of this fall. We've got a lot of 426 Hemi stuff that we're going to get done, and then after that, over the winter and into the spring, we'll be doing the 3D3 that's going to go into Slag Hammer. Defined totally foobarred motor. I I bought this thing. He said it needed a head gasket, right? So I went and I tried to get it started, and it was cranking, cranking. What happened was it broke. The top of the radiator broke off. Okay, and his girlfriend was driving it, and she drove it till it seized. So I I said, oh, I got to drive it up on the trailer. Let me just, I'll start up and drive it on the trailer, one of 4 cylinders. Well, the motor's cranking and cranking and cranking. It's got like no compression at all. And when it finally did light, it sounded like a coffee can full of rocks. It was just banging. And I mean, it was just a horrible racket, metallic racket. And then I gave it a little gas and it went, gunk! And that was it. So it either tossed a rod or it locked up or it broke a piston. I don't know. We're going to take it apart and find out. White Punk on Nitro is pushing 200,000 subscribers. We're getting close. We're getting close. I think we're about 400 to go or thereabouts. And thank you for the congratulations on that. Need Metal, thank you. From a tuning perspective, the different runner lanes on the intake on the inline manifold can't be optimal. There's two ways to look at that. From a fuel distribution standpoint, you're correct. And what I have seen so far is that where you think the fuel should be going isn't really where the fuel goes. There is some sort of confusing clusterfuck sort of thing that happens in a plenum of one of these Slant Six motors. So I will definitely agree with you on that. That's not optimal. On the flip side, you've got three different length intake runners. You got the two longer ones on the the longest ones on the outside, two very short ones in the middle, and the two moderate sized ones to cylinders 2 and 5, right? Well, those three runners tune at different RPMs. So what you're doing is you're spreading the torque curve out a little bit further over the range of the engine. And I tell you, if you drive you drive a Slant Six and you try to compare it, let's say to a log style manifold engine, like let's say a 300-inch Ford or not even a 300, like the 220, the small Ford, the 220, is it 220? There's a distinct difference in torque. The Slant Six has a much more linear torque curve, where the log type of manifolds, they don't. You can feel the difference. I missed a super chat from Dragon Gamer. Oh shit! I'm sorry, brother man. Let me go back and find it. Bear with me, guys. Oh god, I look rough up close. Ooh, I need a shave. Thank you. K&N made the ECI in 2018. It works like an open spacer and monitors the air to fuel ratio on your mechanical carburetor. USB drive programs the device. Really? But okay, let me read this again. It works like an open spacer, so it mounts underneath the carburetor, and monitors the air fuel ratio on your mechanical carburetor. A USB drive programs the device. But what does it do? You still run into a regular carburetor. Uh, let's see. The K&N thing was a flop. I haven't heard of it. I have no idea how it works. and his description of it only made me understand less of how it works. And I'm not ragging on you, brother, man. I'm just saying I can't picture it. Mopar Mitch, Uncle Tony, remember when you once asked us guys on Fable what we thought about watching car content on YouTube? I never dreamed it would be this big. Right? Neither did I. Thank you, Fubar. Fubar just put up a link to our merch. Tony, do you think a V12 based on the Slant Six would have worked? It's an honest question. I mean, a V12, it's not going to matter what you base it off of. A V12 is going to be a superior engine to a V6, or to an inline six. You're doubling everything. What could you do it with a Slant Six? Not practically. I mean, not with the way the engines are designed. It would to fit them, like they would have to be. First off, you'd have to go for more than a 45-degree slant. It or 40-degree slant. You'd have to go for like a 90. You'd have to slant it even further to get both of the engine. No, it wouldn't be a good package. Did I say it's a 30-degree slant? James Hudson, well, you mentioned it. Why do you like the Mitsubishi 3-liter? I had one in a 94 Caravan. If you had one, then you know why I like it. Those engines they're strong. They they ate head gaskets. They had some timing belt issues. Always putting water pumps on those damn things. But they make great power. They're strong motors. You'll never see one with a bad bottom end. I had one in a what year was this thing? I had one in an 89 or it was a 90 Daytona, 90 or 91 Daytona, 3-liter 5-speed, right? That car was downright fast. That it was muscle car fast. Like it's probably one of the most underrated or unmentioned combinations ever. The 3-liter in the Daytona bodies with a stick was a little freaking rocket. And like I said, I worked on a lot of those engines when I was a regular mechanic, but that particular one turned me on to its normally aspirated performance potential. Um, Greg wait, Eric Johnson, talk 225 slant six. 30/78 model before you lift cam, solid lift 500 CFM 2 barrel 340 valve springs, 100,000 shaved off the deck, about 220. I guess, Eric, I'm not really understanding what 30/78 model is. But yeah, you could get close to 200 horsepower out of one, just well tuned with well sorted, the typical stuff: headers, intake, carburetor, cam, some minor porting. You can get 200 horsepower out of them without really pushing it. But the thing is, once you get past north of like that 200 horsepower zone, the gains are really hard. You've got like the difference between. I'm gonna explain it to you. It's like some engines, the horsepower gains come easy, right? You'll get big percentage return on let's say porting investment, that sort of thing. On the slant, it's once you get past the easy stuff, cam intake and headers, then it becomes really hard to make power with them. Mopar Man, Tony, why not make a homemade header for the Slant Six that mocks the factory exhaust? You mean mimics the factory exhaust manifold? They sell the Slant Six header pipe flange kit on eBay. It would be free of course. It's tight. It's just too tight. You know, I could cobble together a header and it wouldn't be any better than the exhaust manifold that's on there. It's just too tight. You would actually have to Even video. If I shot video, it wouldn't do it justice. You actually have to come in here and physically look three-dimensionally at the area where where the motor meets the doghouse, and then the front suspension, the bottom and the lower control arm. You would be like, oh no, you can't get anything through there. I had a hard time getting the one pipe through. Ben Smith, Magnum four-cylinder Tony, and Mopar four-cylinder with Magnum chambers. Those made That's actually the AMC straight forward that they used in the Cherokee. It's a what is it, 153 cubic inches or something along those lines. That's actually an AMC motor, and it's a derivation of the 4 liter. Essentially, it's a 4 liter with two cylinders cut off it. What's on the? I just got a cam for my 170. It specs as a 3/4. There goes that term. It specs as a 3/4 race slant six cam, 430 lift, 276, 268 duration. All right, so that's going to be advertised duration. So your duration at 50 is going to be like two. It's going you want to run 11 comp ratio and you're 60. Yeah, yeah. That's not a big crazy cam. Um, but that with 1101 compression and 60 hyperpack, actually that looks like a good combination. That'll be a happy that'll be a nice mid-range. Um, that's going to be a nice motor from 2500 to around 5500. It's going to be a solid good combination, and that tunes in right where that hyperpack manifold works. So yeah, you're going to be like okay at like 4000 RPM, you're going to be the happiest guy on earth with that combination because it's just going to be sweet, right? It's not going to be a drag strip killer. It's not going to turn out. It's not going to spit out crazy times or shut anybody down. But it's going to feel great in the mid range. That's a good combination for that. SRP, what's your goal as far as this low budget drag racers? I don't really have a goal. I like working with junk. You know what I mean? It's fun, right? It's frustrating, but that's the thing. To me, overcoming those issues the frustration is just part of it. It's fun. It's a challenge. So I mean, I don't really have a goal, other than to just share what I've learned with you guys and also learn from you. I pick up a lot of stuff, you know. I pick up a lot of little because I'm an old timer, right? I'm very set in my ways, okay. But every once in a while, I'll find like a little kernel of wisdom in like the comments or in these lives that we do that gets the wheels turning. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. Let's see. Hey Andy, I didn't see you pop in there. Ben Smith, thoughts on those Carter AFB 2 barrel carburetor clone? I've never seen an AFB 2 barrel. AFB literally means aluminum 4 barrel. That's what the FB stands for, 4 barrel. Really super fat hog 86. I'd like to see the Miata line up against a hot Datsun Z. It would probably run pretty close. It would probably because I've had Datsun Z cars, early ones, 240s, right? And yeah, I'll tell you what, the Miata is very, very reminiscent of a 240Z. Timothy Keith, once you get over the 200,000 hump, 400,000 subscribers is closer than it seems. I've watched white YouTube channels smolder for years to break out in just a few months. Let me tell you something about this subscriber number. The subscriber number doesn't really mean that much, right? So I didn't want to talk about this stuff. I want to talk about slants, but it is the topic of conversation, like in between Kathy and I, and like because obviously we're coming close to a milestone. So, but you have to understand something about the subscriber number. It doesn't actually mean very much. We have as many subscribers as we do, the number of subscribers as we do, because we do extremely varied stuff. So, like for instance, we'll do a historical piece, and people will cruise through and they'll look at that and be like, "Oh, I like this guy," and they'll click on that. And then we'll do a drag racing piece. The guy who subscribed because of a historical piece isn't going to click on the drag racing piece. He doesn't care. But another guy will say, "Oh, I like this guy. He does drag racing," and he'll click subscribe. Um, and we'll do like a technical how-to, and yet another guy will say, "Oh, I like this guy. I'm going to subscribe," but he won't watch any of the other videos. So the subscriber number, all the subscriber number really means is that since we've been doing this channel, at least 200,000 individuals have stopped by, said, "I like this guy," hit the subscribe button, and then they moved on. It really doesn't mean that very much. About the only correlation that I've seen since we started this channel to the subscriber number is that you get approximately on an average video, you'll get approximately 10% of your subscriber number will be what you get in a day's video. So if we have 200,000 subscribers, I expect to get approximately 20,000 views in the first day that a video is up. That's the only correlation that I've come across so far that I've been doing this to views and subscribers. So like I said, it's a nice number. It's a cool number. It's fun to see it grow like that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to kid you, right? It's like, 410 to go, right? So, yeah, it's fun, right? But it really, in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't mean very much. Bruce W. Tony, check out Veritasium on YouTube. He's done an article on how the YouTube works for viewers. I think he said, like you, don't put too much faith into subscriber numbers. No, like I said, the subscriber number just means that many individuals have come across your channel and were inspired enough or happy enough to say, "I like this guy, subscribe." Right? That's all it means. It doesn't mean that you put out a video and 200,000 people are going to like run to their computer or flip open their phone and watch it. No, it doesn't mean that. But but in our case, it means that we can count on approximately 10% of that number, approximately. Because, like for instance, when we had 100,000 viewers, it was normal for us to get 10,000 views on a video the first day we put it out. When we had 150,000 subs, it was normal for us to get 15,000 views or so. And now we have 200,000 subs, and it's normal for us to get about 20,000 views the first day a video is out. And it changes. Some videos you'll get 14,000 views, some videos you'll get 30,000 views the first day, but the average is roughly 10%. Tony gets that many views a month. We get one on average. We get 1.5 million views a month. 1.5 million views. Well, hey Tony, mentioning the 240Z, how does their engine stack up against the Slant Six? I know the factory there was small, the well the inline six, the 240 motor was a pickup truck motor. He built it as a pickup truck motor, but it's a good one. It's a really good one. It was designed from a later era than the Slant Six was. It was designed for a little bit different purpose than the Slant Six motor was. So I would say that the original Z motors, those 240s, I would say it's a superior engine. Ford man, I sub for all the awesome content. whatever it may be in a particular video. The content is great either way. Don't stop, Tony. I'm not going to stop. We're raising the ante. We're making more videos. We're growing the channel. We're growing our network. You know what I mean? No, we're absolutely dedicated to keep doing this and keep raising the bar as far as it can go. You know what I mean? So, but we have fun with it. You know, that's the whole point of this channel. We have fun with it. Um, and I think the variety is pretty good. I think that if you're a general gearhead, because we have, you would be amazed, right? We have so many people who are like dedicated Ford people, like you are, right? Dedicated Chevy people, dedicated circle track racers, dedicated import guys that are regular viewers of our channel because like I'm a gearhead, so I do, even though the cars and stuff that I'm working on may not be like your cars, you still identify with like what I do because you're a gearhead too. So it's like and that's where we try to structure this channel so that like it does cross all, you know what I mean? Even though we're working mostly with Mopars, mostly with classic era stuff, it does kind of cross all of those, those barriers. Ben Smith, would you use a Carter clone BBD on a 318 like the $80 new on Amazon? I mean, you know what? I tell you what, it's hard to hurt a BBD. The BBD, okay, if I had to pick my favorite mechanical device, right? Okay, if you only had one mechanical device to work with for the rest of your life, right? What would it be? It would be a BBD. Right? The BBD is the ultimate simplistic, carburetor. So, and it's actually a clone of the Stromberg, right? Um, yeah, no, I wouldn't have any hesitation buying an $80 BBD clone off of Amazon. I didn't even know they had them. Otherwise, I'd buy one myself just to have it on the shelf. Um, I love the BBD. You know what I mean? Like the BBD is amazing. It's the only carburetor I know that you could like do a drop rod change with the engine running. I mean, literally, you can take the top of the carburetor off, right? You could do a jet change with the engine running. It'll sit there and run with everything apart, right? They're beautiful. It's the only engine. It's the only carburetor I know that you could change the needle and seat assembly and never disturb the carburetor because needle and seat is built into the inlet fitting, right? So it's like the BBD is just like it's like the engineering gods said to us mortal mechanics, here, have something that like is just even you can't screw this up, right? That's like the BBD. I love BBDs. You send me. You don't have to send me a link. I'll find it. I'll find it. Uh, Michael, some of us love a variety of makes and models as long as they're old like us. I mean, I don't like stuff because it's old. I like stuff because I like the engineering from that era. Matthew Mahan. Hey, Tony, thanks for the great channel. Thank you, sir. Thank you for viewing. Why did Chrysler use the straight six in some cars and the slant six in others during the same period of time? They never did. The only year that there was overlap, I believe, was 1960, where they still had the floating power flathead six in some applications and the slant six in the Valiant, right? Other than that, no. Chrysler in domestic American cars, Chrysler only used the slant six. In like the Australian market cars, they used the Slant Six until '69, and then they replaced that with what is the Hemi Six. Nick Summers, where do you get your torque converters customized? I have a C3 Ford that needs a stall raised to 3,500 to 4,000, and haven't found anyone that can do it. Try PTC. Hank Reardon, can I do a low buck 6-pack with 3 BBDs? They have, if you hunt around, you can find, I've seen them pop up every once in a while at swap meets and like online. Uh, Somebody, I think it was Offenhauser, cast a low deck, so it'd be 383, 361, 383, 400, a low deck, 3 deuce intake manifold that with the Stromberg footprint, which is actually the same as a BBD footprint. The Stromberg uses 3 bolts, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. The BBD uses the same exact footprint, but it has 2 bolts in the front, same, and then 2 in the back instead of the single. So you could actually build a 3 deuce BBD low deck motor using that intake manifold if you could find one. Bruce W., I'm a bit late today. Can you update Plan Z, please? Trans, brakes, all good now. Okay, well, it rained today. We were going to take the car on the side and do it again, and it rained. But the update of it is that the transmission isn't leaking. I did a few, well, I had the car apart. I did a few things to it. Just refined a couple of things. Yeah, the brakes work fine. Everything's good there. Both wheels, lock, got a good firm pedal. The seal is good so far. I revved it. I power braked it. I did everything I could to try to get it to like be damaged, right? And it didn't. So no leaks. Looks like we've got our front seal issue fixed. And just as I was getting ready to have Kathy come over and shoot video, it downpoured. So and at that point, that's why I says, you know what? I'm just going to go live for a couple hours and talk Slant Six because I'm in a Slant Six mood. Jiffy McSchlitz, any 4-barrel intake manifolds are built for your for a Poly 318. Yeah, but you're going to pay for them, bro. You're going to pay for them. There was a factory 4-barrel intake manifold for those engines until 1962. It's cast iron, very heavy cast iron intake manifold. There's Y-end manifolds kicking around, old ones. Nobody's made one in a long time. They're out there, but you're going to pay. You'll pay a good $500 or $600 for like an aftermarket 4-barrel intake manifold for a Poly. Evan C., which of your V8s run a 2-barrel? Any particular reason? Any of my V8s run a 2-barrel? I have a 2-barrel on the 318 in the Caravan. Because it's stock. Because that's how it came, and I have no reason to modify it. I have 18 cars and trucks, so it takes me a minute to remember what's on what. No, the only 2-barrel V8 I have currently is the one in my Dodge Caravan, 318 2-barrel. Everything else I own is V8 wise. It's got either a single or a dual 4-barrel on it. Ben Smith, where can I get one of those threaded wire air cleaner holders for a BBD? I can't find them anywhere. I don't know. I don't know exactly where you can find. I'm sure somebody here has a stock 2-barrel BBD kicking around that they could mail you. That it's called a bale, by the way. The part that clips over the top of the carburetor and has the stud sticking through it. It's like a wire piece with the stud. It's called a bale. What's on it, Tony? Plan Z looks awesome, reminiscent of a '68 Hemi. Okay, it wasn't. It's not supposed to be reminiscent of a Hemi A body. What it actually is, what I perceived it to be, is a 1970 H gas car. I built it as a gasser. Okay, H gas. You had A, B, C, D, right? You had all those. You had the gas classes, okay, gassers. Well, there was one class called H gas, and H gas was limited to inline six-cylinder engines and flathead V8s, right? And those are the only engines that you'd find in H gas. So when I conceived this car, I wanted, and that's why it's got like the STP decals on the front and all of that. When I conceived this car, it was a 1970 H gas car. And the reason I've got a snorkel on there is because you could have gotten, and eventually I would like to replace the one that's on there with one of them AMC Rambler Scrambler snorkels, right? But seriously, that's what this car is. And you see the freaking gasser people. The gasser people are like, oh, it doesn't have a straight axle, right? Please, no, a lot of cars didn't have straight axles in the gasser days, but that's what this car is. It's an exact reproduction of what a 1970 H gas car would be. Uh, Uncle Tony, what type of tobaccos do you prefer on race day? I smoke bugler. That's all I ever smoke. SRP. So, what's the best brand lifters to buy? I have no idea. I have no idea, and I'm going to tell you right now, nobody else does either, because everybody across the board is having all sorts of problems, and nobody can identify the source of these things. Nobody. It's like because you'll hear 50 different things. Nobody seems to have a straightforward answer. One guy will say, "Yeah, it's used this lifter, this fine," and then the next guy will say, "I use those lifters, and they collapsed, or they went flat, or they did whatever." It's horrible. It's horrible. Don't take my word for it. Do the searches yourself. It's an epidemic. So no, I can't make any recommendations on what to buy. I hope your luck is better than most everybody else's luck currently. Brian, if that's H gas and what was D gas? Well, they were all power to weight. Okay, so it was cubic. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say power to weight? I'm sorry. They were all cubic inches to weight. So A gas was like 6 pounds per cubic inch. B gas was like 7 pounds per cubic inch. C gas was right. So they went through A through A B C D E F G gas. Yeah, so like for instance, like a degasser, a typical degasser of the day would be like say a lot of Corvettes. A degas car would have been like an early Corvette with like a 250 to 260 cubic inch engine, right? That would have been like a degasser. Richard Pelvin, I have some sealed power big block lifters that have been sitting on the shelf for 20 years. Hopefully, they're still, yeah. If they've been on the shelf for 20 years, you're probably fine. Um, Tony, what's the maximum you can bore the cylinders in a 63 170? All of these engines, all Chrysler engines from the era, doesn't matter which one it is, they're all designed to take a 60 overbore. So the minimum cylinder wall thicknesses you'll find cast into any of the V8s or 6s of the era, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s Chrysler products. They're all designed across the board for a maximum overbore of 60 thousandths of an inch. More than that, and there are some people, I know people who've bored poly blocks 130 thousandths of an inch to get a 340 size, right? Um, but once you try to go past the 60 thousandths of an inch, then you got to start going sonic checking things to make sure there's any core shift or anything like that. But all of your Chrysler engines, and the Slant Sixes included, are designed for a maximum overbore of 60 thousandths of an inch. In fact, if you look at any of the gaskets that are available, any of the normal any of the normal over the counter gaskets, like let's say you order a set of Felpro gaskets for a 318 or for a Slant Six or a 440, whatever it happens to be, you'll notice that the fire ring on those gaskets is always 60 thousandths of an inch larger than if you build with a stock bore. So all of the aftermarket gaskets, replacement gaskets for these engines, are all automatically 60 over. Um, let's see. Oh, geez, guys, we're 2 hours in, and I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it a night. I am having fun with this live. This is. I love when these things go smooth like that, right? Um, I could talk tech all the time. Um, so anyway, guys, listen. I'm gonna call it a night, right? Um, again, our mods, Ari, Fubar Zero, John, right? Thank you as always. Everybody contributed with super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Look, that's where it goes. It all goes right there and right there and right there, right? So and right here too, because we got bills to pay, right? We appreciate all of the super chat. You have no idea how grateful we are, and all of the good conversation, man. You know, we're always grateful for the good conversation. You guys are awesome, and thank you for being you, and thank you for watching us and being a part of all of this. So. That's it, guys. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna take some Benadryl. Thank you, Dallas. Thank you. I'm gonna go take some Benadryl and do the coma of the damned. So I see you guys tomorrow. Good night.